Hi everyone. Thank you for watching and please subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. As I'm sure many of you know, Jimmy Kimmel's program was yanked off the air a couple of days ago, presumably as a result of something he said, which, if you listen to, isn't anything as drastic, dramatic, horrible, disgusting as they say it was. He said that the GOP is working really hard to make sure that the Charlie Kirk assassin isn't going to be painted as one of their own. That's it. He didn't say that he is one of their own. He said that the GOP is working hard to do that, which they definitely are. We're all seeing this. All you need to do is tune into social media. They're working overtime. They're very offended by the idea that he might be, including that they're also very offended by people simply posting texts and videos of what Charlie Kirk actually said. The problem they have is that we have the receipts. We know what was going on. We know what he was saying. That's just a fact. So basically, they're scrambling in every direction to make sure that this thing doesn't turn on them. And of course, most notably of all, the orange machine in charge, who has been saying for a while, by the way, that he was out to get Jimmy Kimmel or get rid of the guy because he doesn't like anyone that says things he doesn't like, plain and simple. And so they were waiting for the opportunity, and very, very sadly, Brendan Carr, the FCC man, is now, predictably, as happens to all Trump supporters, because now he's become one, even if in the past he was saying everything opposite. He was saying that free speech should be respected. You can never do the kind of thing that he's doing now. So all of this is happening because of the current administration in charge, and most notably and most importantly, because of Trump. No question. Now, the thing is, separately, you have to understand what's going on. And the key reason why this is happening isn't so much Kimmel, though, of course, yes, he's provocative, he's edgy, he gets on Trump's nerves. Of course, all of that is true. But what Trump is doing by controlling the levels of power is he is, in a sense, holding corporations hostage. And this is something that in astrology, in the current cycle, you would link to the shadow side of Pluto that we're currently traversing through to try to get to the other side. Aquarius, as well as in the greater sense, being the sign of the people, the sign of the individual, having power at the same time as the state, hence the definition of democracy. Aquarius is also the sign of groups, the sign of companies. At the moment, not only do they have too much power, we know this, they're also merging and getting bigger because that's how they can compete more effectively with one another. And this is why all of these media companies are saddled with a media that is dying. TV is losing ground to the internet and to streaming and to other forms of communication, but especially to the internet. And so they're trying to join forces in order to compete. And as a result, Trump knows this, and because he's completely unethical, in fact, he is constantly straddling the line between lack of ethics and all-out criminality, he's willing to manipulate the institutions that he controls to say to these companies, hey, if you want your deal to be approved, you're going to have to toe the line. And so Nexstar, in this case, they're working on a $6+ billion deal. Jimmy Kimmel, in that sense, becomes something they can dispense with. And so this is what is happening. Now, he's hoping that the same thing will happen with Seth Meyers at NBC or Jimmy Fallon. I think is also another NBC hire. But that looks a little bit more difficult, if not a lot more difficult, because I don't know that they're in the same situation at the moment. But bottom line, this is what is going on, and it's why it's happening, and it's something we have to get beyond. It's part of the revolution that is coming, because basically the revolution that is coming is to push back on this kind of behavior, which essentially promotes oligarchy. You're making everything really big. Power is centralized at the top, which is, in a sense, what Pluto always tries to do through its domination patterns on the shadow side. On the positive side, Pluto becomes a transforming agent in due time, particularly because of the sign that it's in. Now, at the same time, and this is where these cycles, these charts, all of these things intersect, and you get the case of Jimmy Kimmel, who himself, if you look at his chart, in the immediate sense of like, why did this happen now? It happened now because in the eclipse season that we're in, it turns out that, in fact, the one coming up on Sunday, it's a very late Virgo, solar eclipse, Sun Moon conjunct in Virgo. That is precisely where his Uranus energy is. And Uranus in a chart of a person, is their most independent, most rebellious, most edgy side of their personality. It's actually fantastic. It's often indispensable towards success, because if you don't go your own way, it's always going to be more difficult. And Kimmel is very familiar with doing his own thing. He's been doing it for years. He's a really intelligent man with I think, in my opinion, very good comedy. I'm sure that it's also partly because he has good writers that help him to produce it, etc. So, but the fact that that planet is getting triggered by the eclipse makes it automatically a risky period, because that can bring in the shock result. And Virgo, where Uranus is, Virgo is the sign of work, literally, among other things. It's also the sign of health, etc., but certainly work. So that can happen on that account. Also, he has his Mercury, which is his communication planet. Again, another indispensable point in a chart when you're a communicator, and that's exactly what he is. He's an expert communicator. That's what he makes his living. He makes his living doing communicating, creating jokes, creating excellent dialogue. Pluto right now in Aquarius is making a direct square to that Mercury, which will always signal some kind of change, usually big, maybe perhaps not always this big, but it just turned out that in this case, it is this big. And when you look at the fact that he also is approaching his Saturn return, which comes next year, pretty much makes 2026 a turning point year, the kind of year where decisions are made, directions are taken that then lead you into many, many years hence. That's what happens on strong Saturn cycles. You deal with what you've done up to that point and where you want to go from there. And sometimes the person is able to manage all of that on their own, but sometimes this kind of thing can happen where life forces their hand. And so he would have been in change mode anyway, had this not happened. Now it's forced upon him. But if they realize, going back now to the strategy that Trump and his minions are taking, opening up all these fronts and attacking everyone in every direction, it's an overreach, and it's definitely a game of whack-a-mole, because these people that they're getting rid of from broadcast news, they're just going to move elsewhere, and they're probably going to be more affected. By the way, this happened with Bill Maher back in the period of the Bush administration, George W. After 9/11, he made a joke. It wasn't really a joke. He made a statement about the terrorists being physically brave, which of course, yeah, I mean, if you crash a 737 into a building, I suppose in some sense, you have physical bravery. It was a misplaced statement. He was fired instantly from his job in the conventional media. I don't know what right now. I can't think of whether it was ABC, CBS, or NBC, but it was one of those. He went to HBO, where he's been really successful, and indeed he's more himself now. He can be as edgy as he likes. Same thing is going to happen with Kimmel. Same thing with Colbert, whoever else they try to get rid of, including by the fact that Kimmel, as an aside, as a kind of appendage to his job, had more than 20 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. This guy has no problem connecting with the public, and he's going to become more of a thorn on their side. So that's a fact. And, they're trying to do something, of course, tied to the companies and all that, as I described earlier, but it's ultimately fruitless. And in the meantime, Kimmel will do his realignment over the next, say, 18 months and emerge for them, I think, as an even bigger problem. And the same thing will happen with just about anything they pull on someone in the media, because the media is impossible to control. And indeed, the media is also super important in the American experiment because the media is what keeps governments honest, which is why he's so desperate to try to change the environment. But it's going to be very difficult. And the key reason I say this, just briefly turning to the chart of the man in charge, is because as Saturn now moves into Aries, brings Neptune along with it, though Neptune a little more slowly, but the two of them are working on it, especially Saturn. Saturn is where legal matters are resolved, judicial rulings. You need this to go your way. Now, I'm not saying that all of them will go against him, but the important ones are going to go against him because of Saturn. And that is where I think we should put our focus, which is a matter of letting the cycles unfold to take this to a better place.